Welcome back. The Air Force's budget request for fiscal 2021 is up slightly from last year at $207.1 billion. Bloomberg Government's tracking the Air Force and Space Force budgets for the new fiscal year. Cameron Leuthy is Senior Defense and Budget Analyst for Bloomberg Government. Cameron, thanks for coming on the program. You flagged a bunch of things for me here about the Air Force and Space Force budgets, and I think the one that jumped out at me the most is the Air Force leads all military services in RDT&E spending. They're asking for $47.7 billion this fiscal year. What do you think the significance of that is, Cameron?
Well, the Air Force has always been known as the technological service. So among the three, they are the ones that are the most interested in pursuing cutting-edge research. And so that they're leading the pack is not necessarily new news, but I think the real story is what's going on within the total RDT&E budget and the shift away from more, how shall we say, incremental development and more towards big jumps in technology.
Does that mean that they're pushing away from the RD part, the research and development, toward the T&E part of those four letters, Cameron? Or does it mean something else?
So what we see over the FYDP, so from 21 to 25, is an interesting phenomenon. We see an increase in spending on advanced component development and prototypes. So that's not, the stages are basic, applied, advanced, and then we get to this advanced component development prototypes, which is the fourth stage of R&D, and that grows over the course of the FYDP significantly. So that implies that they think they've found some things in the early stage research that will bear fruit going forward.
You also point me to the IT spending requests at the Air Force in this fiscal year, and what struck me as interesting about that is wouldn't anticipate any place in the federal government someone asking for less than they got the year before. You point out $8.2 billion in fiscal 2021 would be a slight reduction from the fiscal 2020. What's behind that?
So there are, I think, a couple of parts to the story. The first part is the unclassified spending is going down on IT in the Air Force. Classified spending is increasing. So that's a big part of the story. The other part of the story, I think, is there's a lot of research going forward in the Air Force on networks that, and that's because the networks themselves have become much more vulnerable. So there's a lot of R&D related to networks in areas of cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, and other aspects that will make the networks of the future more robust, more survivable.
One of the efforts that Will Roper has undertaken since he's been at the Air Force a number of years now is to drive efficiencies in software. They have all kinds of efforts, Kessel Run and AFWorks and others, where they're trying to do that. Is it reasonable to say that maybe the efficiencies that they're driving in software are resulting in some of the lower budget requests in the IT department, or is that a connection that's not really there?
So I think it's too early to tell, because while Roper's had a couple of years of runtime working on this, you know as well as I do that the commercial space is where a lot of the advances in IT are taking place. And so the Air Force is wisely trying to leverage those improvements to gain efficiencies.
The first year, basically, of the Space Force budget-wise is this one. This is where we start to really get a sense of where they're headed budget priority-wise. What do you see as you examine the numbers for the Space Force specifically, Cameron?
So one of the big takeaways from the budget for the Space Force is that a huge percentage of it is devoted to research, development, test, and evaluation, which is probably no surprise. The other sort of takeaways that you could look at from the $15 billion plus budget for the first Space Force budget are that the lumpiness, right? We know that some of the space assets are very expensive. They don't have large production runs. So think lift, think satellites. Those sorts of capabilities are lumpy. And so you see changes in expendable launch vehicle and other programs where you have these big swings. One year there's a lot of money, the next year there's not.
We have about 30 seconds left, Cameron. What will you watch moving forward, especially as budgets are approved by Congress for this year?
And we don't know when that will happen, but the thing that we're going to be watching the most closely is probably the command, control, and communications budgets and the contracting that devolves from that.
Cameron Leuthy, great to have you as always. Thanks very much.
Thank you.